wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Hello, welcome to She Became Visible, and do I have a treat for you today? I am doing something today that I am hoping will be a monthly occurrence because there is so much going on in the LDS church right now that seems to be directed towards women in particular. And it's almost as if there's a frantic, I've lost control, and they are frantically trying to get everyone back into the game. And so the guests that I have on today, we are all over the age of 60, and we have all kind of just followed the path of obedience up until a few years ago. But specifically, there was a talk given at BYU by the General Relief Society president named Camille Johnson, and it has got the world once again on fire. So let me bring on my guests because I don't want to waste any time. We need to talk about this. I'm going to have each one of the guests introduce themselves, and then we will get this party going because I'm telling you, people, can a week go by? I mean, right now in the LDS church, can a week go by without some kind of headline? It's just amazing. So let me bring on my beautiful and wonderful guests. My fabulous co-host, Lila Tuller. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Renee? You're still a sunbeam, I see.
I'm doing what?
You're still a sunbeam.
I'm still a sunbeam. As Dan McClellan would say, my fit for the day is I'm still a sunbeam, whether Jesus wants me or not.
I love that.
So we have two fabulous women that we have brought on today. Let me bring them on. Martine, there she is.
Hey.
And Yvonne, here we are. Here is our fabulous women's panel. And I want each of them to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their Mormon heritage, and then we will get this party going. So Lila, just reintroduce yourself a little bit to everybody. And then we'll go like the Brady Bunch, right? So Lila, and then Martine, and then Yvonne. Okay.
Really well, okay. Everyone knows, I know I've done this before, but mom of seven.
Well, hopefully, even though this is a Mormon subject, my goal in life is to branch out into the Christian nationalist movement that is overtaking our country and bring in women who are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as Mormons, and introduce that we are in the same fight as other women who are trying to fight this movement right now to put women pregnant, barefoot, back in the kitchen. And so we're not the only ones fighting this fight, but so I'm hoping to have a new audience. So Lila, there may be people who don't know you.
Okay. I'm a mother of 7 kids, grown now. Got married young. I'm divorced. I got divorced at 54, and then husband passed away. Shortly after that, ex-husband passed away. So I'm kind of a single mom of married kids and grandmother and ex-Mormon.
Okay. And you were how old when you got married?
I was just shy of my 19th birthday.
And anyone that's a Mormon will understand that little statement.
Yeah.
And you were married in the Salt Lake Temple?
That's right. Mhm.
Okay. So you followed all the guidance. Okay, Martine, introduce yourself.
I don't have any Mormon cred other than I was a member from 1970 till 2022. So I'm a convert. I was married just shy of my 20th birthday, just 2 days shy of my 20th birthday. I have given birth to 3 children, two of whom were deceased within the first 13 months of life. And I have a grown son. And let's see. I guess that probably does it for now.
And you and Stuart were married where?
Oh, we were married in the Salt Lake Temple, and we will have been married 50 years this August.
Okay, very good. Okay, Yvonne, introduce yourself.
I'm Yvonne, and it says Yvonne Harrell, my name. I maybe had a little bit different childhood because I won't go into that, but I did marry. My husband met at BYU. I was 21. We got married in the Salt Lake Temple in 1975, and we will have been married soon, 50 years in 2025. And just to get on this, to, I guess, preview the topic a little bit, my husband is really, really into everything that was ever said by any of the apostles, and I'm showing his book. This is Charlie's book, but so he sat me down after we were married, and he read me every statement by past prophets about whether a woman, what a woman should be after she is married, and they all said, even when there aren't children in the home, a lot of the quotes said a woman should stay in the home. Her domain is the home. So that was not my experience. I'm not from a patriarchal family. I'm from a matriarchal family. I had, no uncles. My dad was killed when I was 10. My grandfather committed suicide when I was a baby, and a matriarchal family. So this was all new to me that a man should be in charge, even though I was a very active BYU co-ed and wanted to do everything right. But that was news to me. My mother worked, she went back to work after my father was killed, and she was a working mom, and we had to take care of things. But so that was, and I never, I was in the honors program at BYU as a National Merit Scholar. So I thought I would go on and have some kind of a career, but I also wanted to obey God's commands. So yeah, that was me.
That is so fascinating. And I think that, so even though there was a, like you say, more of women in your life and not necessarily a patriarchal order, you were born and raised in the church. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you went through primary, you went through all of the listening to conference and things like that. And so, but did you feel as though your family was like the family in the ward that, unfortunate circumstances fell upon and you were cared for? Or give us a little bit more background. I don't want to get too far off the subject, but being born and raised in the church, what was the background where your mother was working and you had these, where, she was really in charge?
Yes. Well, the background is that when I was born, 2 weeks after I was born, the patriarch, I guess my mother's father, killed himself, committed suicide. 10 years later, her husband, my dad, was killed in a plane crash. 5 years after that, her brother, my uncle, killed himself. 5 years after that, her oldest brother killed himself. So we're a family of, aunts and women trying to negotiate the living in the church, and it was just different. And my mother worked since I was 10. She went back to college, and she went back to work. But so it was a different, we were from Ogden, which is like the Gentile part of Utah. And I
Oh,
broke the mold. I came to BYU, the ultra conservative thing, and I became, pretty ultra conservative and want to do everything that they
wow.
commanded. So that's basically.
So did Charles, recognizing your background, did he feel that it was necessary for you to understand how this was going to work?
I just think he's not a patriarch. You do this and this.
No.
He just wanted me to know these are and maybe I asked him, maybe I did. These are the teachings of the church and what to expect. And so, he wasn't saying this is what I want you to do or I need you to. If I had, if I'd thought but I really want to get my law degree, let's say, which I
Yes.
but
Right.
I'd want to go on. No, but he just wanted me to know, because this is what was interesting to him, what had been taught, what was currently taught, had always been taught. And I was surprised that so many of them said, even when there weren't children in the home. I mean, I knew that they said, you should be there 24/7 for your children. But
Right.
I don't, this little clip that I think that you have it where, or maybe it's where President Benson says, women should not be in the workplace because they're going to be divorced.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
another quote, I think it was in the other article you might cite, said H. Burke Peterson said that this idea that you need to go to work and provide the luxuries, this is from Satan, that you
Right.
need to have this secure income and so forth. So yeah, we got married. We both graduated. We got married in December. Both graduated in April. Charlie worked for Ford, and I didn't work outside the home for all those years when I was having kids. I eventually did go back, and I worked as a assistant librarian for a while. So anyway.
Right. And Lila, when you were having children and before you and your husband separated, did you work at all? Did you have a career?
I did not have a career. I did get a job for a short period of time as a waitress, and it was at night while my husband was home with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That was the arrangement, so we wouldn't have to get a babysitter. And it was really because I wanted to have my own spending money. It was an agreement so that we could stay married. With our marriage counselor said, you need to let her have some money, let her have her own job, and give her a checking account. And because I had been very controlled, so that was kind of the agreement we had. So that's what I did. And then prior to the divorce, I started doing fabric design, and that was what I ended up doing, after he passed. But it was really, I just worked from home.
Right. Interesting. I there's been a lot of things in the news lately about how far women have come. And one of the things, and I send this to my children, that women were not allowed to get credit on their own, have their own checking account, get a loan without their husband's signature until 1975.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had been married for a year when that happened. And I send that to my children just to remind them that, that this is very new, that the little bit of freedom that women have or autonomy that women have is really fairly new, and it's being completely pulled back, which is scary in a completely different podcast. But Martine, you mentioned that you were a convert. And I believe, remind me again, was your mom a single mom?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought I remembered that. And so did you have, before joining the church, did you think, I'm going to have a career?
I'm not sure I was oriented that way. Yes, in a way, education's different in Europe, and I was oriented toward gaining a skill of some sort.
Yes.
It wasn't a useful skill, but it was totally useless. But yes, and then then I joined the church, and I started. I mean, I was almost 16. I was literally a few months shy of my 16th birthday, and I share a birthday with Helen Mar Kimball. That's another thing.
Oh
But
my That's funny.
So, then I started hearing, what from the sisters, even though it was Belgium, most of the sisters actually didn't work, even though most women in Belgium, my aunts and all of that, they did work, but the women in the church did not, because that
Interesting.
teaching, penetrated even that far away, at least in my experience.
Yeah. It's interesting because I am also a convert, but I was 12 when my parents joined the church. And of course, we were just children. So my brother, who was actually living with my biological father, was 15. He was baptized. I was baptized. And my little baby brother was only like a year old. So we were baptized, and immediately, because I was 12, I was just in the final phases of primary before I went into young women's. And so I had to do a quick catch up, learn who these people, the lingo, you have to learn what's a Nephite, what's a Lamanite, and what's the priesthood, Aaronic and Melchizedek. And this is just all lingo that I had to learn at 12. But my mom and dad divorced when I was 7. She got remarried, and she always kind of had she would have like a job for a while, and then she would quit, and then she'd have another job for a while, and then she would quit. But because her children were basically older when she remarried, it was almost like my little brother was put in daycare for a while when she went back to work, but then she quit. And I never really thought about my mom had a career. She just basically had a job. And, we grew up in the Midwest where there was a lot of industrial businesses. And so she worked at the Tampax factory for a while. She worked for Western Electric, putting phones together. And that's where she met my stepfather. So it wasn't really a career. It was more just a job. But being 12 years old, and the most formative parts of a female, I think, I was quickly indoctrinated to where I was supposed to be. Meet someone, get married in the temple. It's funny, all 3 of us were married in the Salt Lake Temple. You're from Belgium. I'm from Illinois. You guys are from Utah. But at that time, there were only so many temples in the world, and the closest temple to Illinois was Salt Lake at that time. So that's where we were married as well. And it was indoctrinated in the wedding ceremony. First of all, we all bowed our heads and were told to obey our husbands as they obeyed the Lord. So that was put into place, right? That I was married in 74, so it's about around the same time. We were all told to multiply and replenish the earth. That was part of the ceremony. And I think as a new married person with a lot of maternal hormones buzzing around, it was like, yes, absolutely, let's do this, And so and also I want to also say, culturally, women staying home was not unusual. Large families were not necessarily unusual. There were lots of other people that had 4 and 5 kids in their family. But at that time, I think we're in such a bubble. Whatever the world was doing, I don't know what the world was doing. I only know what our world was doing in the LDS church. And that was, we are to be married. We are to have children. We are to be stay-at-home moms. So let me introduce the topic of why this is going on right now. There was recently a talk given at Brigham Young University by Camille Johnson, who is the General Relief Society president. Now, what that means is nothing, basically. But as a token, they give a few women a title, tell them they have some kind of important job, and then they tell us how important their job is, and they're actually not doing anything. But regardless, so let me play her talk a little bit, and we can get this whole thing started.
It's a glorious time to be a woman, a covenant woman in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From what or from whom is my optimism derived? Well, let me start with my testimony that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is led by a mighty prophet of God, President Russell M. Nelson, who is the Lord's mouthpiece on the earth today, not only for members of the church, but for the whole world.
I had to stop it right there. I don't know, world, if you know this or not, but this 99-year-old guy is your spokesperson for God. Just in case you didn't know, if you're going to Mark Driscoll's church here in Scottsdale, if you're going to John McCartney's church, if you're going to anybody else's church, I don't know if you know this, this guy right here is your spokesperson for God. So just wanted to let you know. And the other thing I wanted to, Yvonne, I think you sent this, and I had commented on this as well. This woman that is speaking is an attorney. Now, I don't know exactly what kind of attorney her law firm is, what kind of, if she's a trial, prosecuting attorney, real estate attorney, family law and practice attorney. I'm not sure. Do any of you know?
Corporate.
I do to look it up. Does somebody else know? I looked it up, but now I'm not.
Okay, while you're looking it up.
I think it was a corporate, for company.
Oh, a corporate attorney. Okay. So, but one of the things right off the bat, and this is also out there in the cultural world, not just in the Mormon world, but can you imagine having this woman be your defense attorney in court?
Not with that voice.
Exactly. My dear brothers and sisters, my dear murderer, are we going to live? I mean, can you imagine? Anyway, it's, yeah.
Renee, let me just read this. In her legal career, Johnson worked as an advisor and litigator on issues including risk management, employment claims, fair labor standards, ADA, whistleblowing, procedural due process, and pharmaceutical defense.
Okay. All right. So she had to litigate at some point. So her voice was heard, and she had to appear and defend or prosecute, one of the two. And I right off the bat, Martine, remind us how many times she mentions Russell Nelson in this talk.
I didn't go to the very end where she talks about, we need to have children and it's important and all of that. Otherwise, the world will collapse. It was 19 up to where I listened. There was about 7 minutes left. So I can't remember whether she mentioned him after that. I doubt.
Okay. Yeah. So we're like 30 seconds into the talk and she's already, mentioning President Nelson. I would love to be the secret camera in the walls when these people meet, because I don't think, in my experience of over 50, 60 years in this church, I don't remember a prophet being heralded and just bowed and worshiped as much as this man. As much as, I loved President Hinckley. I loved him. I felt like he was just a kind man who just was overworked, trying to do the best he could. And I never heard people worship him the way they worship Nelson. And I cannot help but wonder if there isn't a little bit of demand somehow. It's insane. It's crazy. But let's continue listening.
Why do I feel comforted, inspired, hopeful, and loved when I hear President Nelson speak and when I study his words? Because he speaks for the Savior, whose church he leads.
Okay, can we start out? Did Jesus Christ organize a church?
I don't think so.
No, there was no church organized by Jesus Christ. He did not command an adobe building to be built and said every Sunday from 9 a.m., please all gather together. He taught his principles. I've done a lot of listening to Christianity and who started it, Paul or Jesus. And, Jesus Christ did not establish a church on the earth. So right away, this is babble, but here we go.
President Nelson's words are his words, spoken as a prophet to prompt us to change and draw closer to Jesus Christ. I feel immeasurably blessed to serve during this season. President Nelson is uniquely sensitive to us.
Ladies, are we going to be able to get through this? I don't know if we can. Let me fast forward a little bit.
Just the size of that screen and that face behind her. It's massive.
Yeah.
No,
She's at BYU.
that's true.
We have good
That's
video
true.
stuff.
Yeah. And here's the deal. While I was preparing for this, of course, I've got the Chad Daybell trial going on, and I'm listening to the visions and the patriarchal blessings that were given, and the over the phone Zoom blessing that was given, and again, the lingo, the reference to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is standing right here next to me. Jesus Christ has told me to tell you this, and so it's not. People outside of the church will not recognize where this comes from. But listen to Camille, and here you go.
Constant influence of the Holy Ghost. Maintaining the presence of the Spirit requires effort, energy, prayer, scripture study, study of the words of living prophets, preparation for partaking of the sacrament, repentance, and personal acts of daily devotion. That, sisters, is how we will get our answers. Perhaps you believe you don't have time for all of that.
Here we go.
Maybe you are pursuing your education, bearing children, nurturing and caring for children, earning a living, serving in the church, or caring for your parents. Maybe you are doing many of those things at the same time. I did. I hope you can learn from my experience. What I have discovered in juggling my responsibilities is that establishing priorities is critical to success and happiness, love of God, and love of his children. But what I learned is that I'm far more efficient and effective when I include scripture study in my daily routine.
Okay, Renee,
Yes.
I gotta
Days
say
it
that I was really glad that she did have a little bit of humility in there, because right before that clip you just played, she said, I didn't always study my scriptures when I was in school. And I'm like, yes, get some realism in there, Camille, because when you have all that going on, I was glad she said that. So
Yeah.
way to go. We got to praise her.
This reminds me of the 80s. And you all remember, the 1980s, there was in the effort to have a feminist idea, a feminist life, it kind of almost shifted over to, you don't have to be a stay-at-home mom. You don't have to be a working mom. You can be both. You can do it all. You can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. And now what she's saying is what we were told in the 80s is, we can do it all. You can go to school. You can be a full-time mother. You can have a 30-year president of a law firm, and you can have a calling at church, and you can support your husband in his career and in his calling at church. You can do that all. And what have we all learned?
Something has to give.
Well, Renee, we weren't taught that in the church. That was the world's
yes.
view of
Yes.
it. The church was like, no, as you're going to play in 1987 from President Benson, the prophet, women, when you should be at home full time with their children and not in the workplace. Come home from the workplace. So we've always been, we're there now. Camille Johnson is an example, and the young women, our children and our grandchildren are like, yeah, we can do it all.
Yeah.
It always takes us a couple of decades to catch up, but we always do change. She's an example of change.
You're right, Yvonne. It really was. It was the world that was saying you can have it all, you can do it all, and it was the church was saying it doesn't even matter.
Too, because
but now the church is saying it too. Yeah, it's going along with President Holland, where it's like the church is here, and then we're here, and then the church is here, and then we're here.
Exactly.
But the problem is
last Friday.
The what?
Only since last Friday.
Yes, true. Yeah. The revelation.
Only until she spoke. Before that, it was still very muddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And I
and I remember when I first heard about her and I looked her up and found out that she had been a practicing attorney for over 30 years. I remember going, when did we get to do that? When was that okay? I don't remember that, And even Annette Dennis, she didn't have a career. She how do they phrase it? I love it how they phrase this. She attended BYU and then met her husband, which means she went for a semester, met her husband, got married, And so she didn't have a career from what her bio reads on the church website. So yeah, I was just like, when are we heralding this kind of accomplishments? This is all new. Yeah, absolutely right. All right, let's bring this back on.
It will not be possible to survive spiritually without the guiding, directing, comforting, and constant influence. You're pursuing your education, bearing children, nurturing and caring for children, earning a living, serving in the church, or caring for your parents. Maybe you are doing many of those things at the same time. I did. I hope you can learn from my experience. What I have discovered in juggling my responsibilities is that establishing priorities is critical to success and happiness. Love of God and love.
We skip past that.
Constant companion. Then we will receive answers and direction for our lives. But as we understand and embrace foundational truth, our desire to let God prevail in our lives will increase. We will invite Jesus Christ to be the author and finisher of our faith and of our stories. We will want to.
I never listened to this on regular
his
speed,
church
just to
when
let you know. You can listen to her like on twice the speed.
On twice speed, that's probably a good idea. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. One of the things that she said, and Martine, remind everyone what her husband did for a living.
He owns a used car business on State Street in Midvale. From what I read, he's been in business decades, and since they were called as mission leaders. He was called as a mission president. You don't get that calling without being very wealthy, well-to-do, comfortable, let's say.
Comfortable, yeah.
So I have questions about this because she says that she did this, to ensure, whoops, the camera's not seeing me. Security for her family. Yeah, I'm trying to pull up my notes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that she says in this talk is that she had her first baby after she passed the bar. Well, that's a lot of education to have. She's gotten her undergraduate. She's gone to law school. Then she's taken the bar. I don't know how long it took her to do that. So she has had a lot of education that she put off having children to do. And then she had her first child when she passed the bar. And then she said, and all she said was, my husband and I both, raised our children together, and it was a struggle. That's all she says. Now I know from having raised children that there's only 24 hours in a day. And the children have a time frame that they go to school. Then you get a call from the school that says, so-and-so is running a fever. Could you please come and get them? Or you have the school call you and say, so-and-so fell down on the playground. Can you come and get them? There was never a day that would go by that there wasn't something that stopped whatever it was I was doing and made me interrupt those plans because I had children that needed my care. Yvonne, yeah.
I just want to say, Renee, that I mean, I don't know Camille Johnson, And there are women who can do it, right? I don't want to say that there aren't super women or women who have a lot of energy or a lot of gifts. I don't want to hold back women at all. I think it's wonderful that she was able to, have a happy marriage, have her 3 beautiful kids, and be a lawyer at the same time. I mean, wouldn't we all like to do all those things? The only problem that I had with her talk, which just grated on me, was I know she's heard the same things that I heard all growing up in the church, but then she at the same time she's saying so over and over again, follow the prophet, let God prevail, do what
Exactly.
follow the commandments. And her it's an hypocritical example. What she did goes exactly contrary to what the prophet was telling women to do at the time. I mean, you just wanted to be a little bit of acknowledgement and humility of like, and because we all saw that. We saw women in our ward who felt so guilty because they were working. They had to work. They really were in probably more financial straits than she ever was, but they felt so much guilt. And we saw
Right.
women who did decide to work get judged harshly by I mean, I have some examples of women that both of those things happened. And yeah,
It's almost
Right.
she was fine about it and very proud of it and then she talks about her struggle was when they asked them to serve as mission president, and she had to quit her job and he had to quit his, and they had to let God prevail because they could have made a lot of money during that time.
well, I think that's a little uncharitable. I think being a ground myself, she would miss the birth of 2 of her grandkids. Yeah, it is a sacrifice to go on a mission. I'm
not
in that age. It totally is, but it's not a financial sacrifice, Lila. You're right.
I'm not saying it's not a sacrifice. In fact, I think it's terrible that the church asks this of elderly people who have grandkids that need them and kids that need them, and and they're asked to go do this. I just think it's a lot to ask. She falls
Well,
back.
and Sister Dennis said the same thing in her talk. She talked about how she has a daughter. I think she has 4 children, and she had 3 boys and a girl. And her daughter struggled with some mental issues, and she was very struggling because they were asked to go on a mission. And for the first mission, I believe they took their daughter with them. But then the second mission, they had to leave her behind, and they had to have the faith that she would be okay. And I thought, what is enough? What is enough that you leave your grandchildren, you leave your daughter with mental health issues, and you sacrifice that to go work in the mission home in Mexico City and do free labor so the church doesn't have to pay anyone to do their books and their, all of that kind of stuff. At what, the indoctrination that it's the sacrifice, it's that whole idea. Have you sacrificed enough to be accepted and welcomed into Jesus's presence? What was your sacrifice? Because you're right, Yvonne. I mean, every type of resentment is usually based on some kind of jealousy. And so it's like, yeah, I wish that I would have had parents that said, look, we're going to do everything we can because education is a priority in our family. And we would like to make sure that if anything ever happened to your husband, that you had some way to fall back and take care of your family. It's really important that women do. That would have been lovely, but that's not what my parents were taught. And that's not what we were taught. And let's show a little bit of that, what Yvonne is talking about. So this is a comment that was made by the prophet, that was the prophet of the church. This was in 1973. As you said, I graduated from high school in 1972. I was married in 1974. And so this was the doctrine that all of us grew up with. And what President Kimball is saying here is that when the Lord organized his world and established his policies, he could have filled the earth with physical bodies in some way than that which he designed, perhaps some kind of an incubator process. But it seems that merely filling the earth with humans was not the great objective of our Lord. In order to properly people the world, it was necessary that every child born into this world should have two parents, a father and a mother, to teach him, to train him, to love him, that child should be made aware of what was expected of him. May I inject here that selfishness is the element that breaks and corrodes and destroys marriages, as it destroys lives and all that is good. The time to make good marriages for the turn of this century is now, in the 1970s. Now is the time to organize your program, to set your standards, to solidify your determination. Skipping down, the Lord has ordained that each of these mature spirits, which he has created, shall be permitted to come to this earth at a proper time, be provided with a small, pure body and a mind uncluttered. Now, that is what we were taught, right? There is a spirit world. We all went to My Turn on Earth, Saturday's Warriors, right? In fact, my oldest son, we went to see this at the Keller Auditorium in Portland, Oregon. My baby was probably a month old because I was so happy and so proud of my new baby. I think I went to church a week after he was born. Look what I have. I've got a baby. And so we went to Saturday's Warriors. When we walked in, they said there were people standing at the front and they said, "Can we use your baby in the play?" I'm like, yeah, So they changed our seats, put us in the front seat so that when the time came, they could come and get the baby and then bring him on stage as the baby that just came down. So we were all taught that there were babies, spirit babies in heaven, and it was our responsibility to provide bodies for them to come to this earth into a loving home and experience the experience of life with our bodies. So if we didn't have babies, where were they going to go?
Other homes.
Yeah, other homes,
Yeah.
non-LD homes.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So there's no pressure there. This is in 1973. So, and I just for a side note, Martine, this is why I love you. This is President Nelson in 2024, the big picture. This is President Nelson, lower right, in 2023. And I'm so stupid. I'm like looking at him going, dang, he looks good for 99. When did he get glasses? And wow, his forehead's all smoothed out. I'm so stupid. Martine is the one that goes, well, obviously they use AI.
Yeah.
Maybe, somebody said steroids, but what I'm noticing here is that the picture on the left, the one from conference, where he's supposedly sitting in a red chair, but he's not. He's sitting in a wheelchair. And you can see why if you look at the other picture, because in the wheelchair, they were able to get him to sit straighter.
Yeah.
And make him look better than sitting in the chair where, in the red chair where he's sinking in.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I just thought that was funny. And then this top right is the general presidency of the Relief Society. And what is the lady's name on the right? What
Her last name is Yi, I think, isn't it?
What is it?
What is it?
Her last name is Yi, I think. Yee.
Okay. So I'm wondering why Dennis and Johnson are doing all the talking. Where's the other girl?
Yeah.
They haven't given her an assignment yet. She hasn't been given an assignment by the priesthood. Dennis was given the garment assignment.
And Johnson was given the assignment to tell us all to go home and have babies.
And replenish, and we're waiting to see what the single woman, because I think, I'm not sure. I think Sister Yi is single, but I could be wrong. I think she is.
Oh, I think you might be right. Yeah, I think you might be right.
I was thinking, Chieko Okazaki was, I believe, the first member of a General Relief Society presidency to have had a career. And she was a teacher and a principal.
Yeah.
So this is 1990, I think.
Yeah, you're right. She was my favorite. I loved her.
Yeah.
She didn't have the primary voice. And, I loved listening to her.
She had
But
so
yeah,
much
you're
passion,
absolutely,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
When
So
she-
let's go a little bit to, like you said, in 1987, the prophet of the church gave a talk, another one of these. They got to stop giving talks at BYU, because those are the ones that get videotaped and thrown into YouTube and all the controversy. Nothing at conference. They didn't say anything that, crazy at conference. There's always one or two, but it's always those dang BYU talks where they're like, what, So let's look at this poor President Benson.
That's conference, by the way.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, this one was conference.
He is a conference. Yeah.
Circle, they can gratefully exclaim, as did Hannah, quote, "For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition, which I ask of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord."
Can I just say right here that my poor mother, we were driving in the car. This is what I'm talking about, Chad Daybell. This is why, because this is where these comments, these little phrases, these little cliches get into the vernacular of the Mormon world. We're driving in the car, and I said to my mother, my brother, Love, seems to be infatuated with the military. He studies the Navy and the Air Force, and he actually started working for Franklin Covey, and he would go to the base in San Diego, and he would speak to the Navy SEALs that were being trained there, and he was just infatuated with the military. I said, why doesn't he join the military? And she said, oh no, I have dedicated him to the Lord. I told the Lord when he was born that he would be a servant unto him. And I'm like, okay, can we just go back a little bit when I came home from the post office and said, I don't know how I'm going to pay for college, but I picked up this pamphlet about the US Navy, and you said, that's a great idea. Why don't you join? So nothing, no dedication to the Lord. Like, get rid of her, sacrifice, go, just get out of here. I don't want to have to prepare 2 boxes of macaroni and cheese. Just, get out of the house as soon as possible. But this is the kind of comments when he's talking about Hannah and I've dedicated him to the Lord and all of this kind of stuff, that this is where this comes into the vernacular. That's crazy.
Isn't that beautiful? A mother praying to bear a child and then giving him to the Lord. I have always loved the words of Solomon. Children are an heritage of the Lord, and happy is the man and woman that hath their quiver full of them. I know the special blessing of a large and happy family, for my dear parents had a quiver full of them, full of children. Being the oldest of 11 children, I saw the principles of unselfishness, mutual consideration, loyalty to each other, and a host of other virtues developed in a large and wonderful family, with my noble mother as the queen of the home.
Okay. So there we are, a quiver full.
Men talking about women.
Yeah.
Men talking about women. There used to be a vanity plate around here in Salt Lake, a quiver full. It was a big van. It was like a 15-passenger van.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Very
then
proud
Martine,
man.
when you learned that your children, that, as you mentioned, not, you had 3 that were born alive, but 2 of them didn't live past 13 months. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And come to find out there was a genetic disorder. Did you feel pressure, or did you have anyone talk to you about adoption or anything like that?
No, we didn't. I don't believe we had anybody talk to us about adoption. I think in another podcast, Stuart mentioned he was talked to by a member of the first presidency of the 70 about not having a vasectomy because the brethren had talked about it and they didn't know if that could be restored in the next life after the resurrection.
Which is so interesting. So your physical body that you've had a vasectomy, even though every hair on your head will be restored, but you're still going to have to be
God
having
may not
sex.
be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's what he was told. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And the rest, and Lila, I know your 7th child was a difficult pregnancy, a difficult birth, and you almost died. And I know with my youngest child, I almost died. He had a very difficult birth. But I remember, even because he was born in 85, and that was right when a lot of that remember the Romanian orphanage thing that was going on. And I remember thinking, we need to adopt. We need to, because I was going to have 8 children at least. That was my goal, was to have at least 8. And so I thought we should probably adopt some Romanian children. And fortunately, it didn't get any farther than that brain thought, But I mean, did you feel the pressure to have more at any time, or, anything like that, that it wasn't a quiver full? If you only had 7, why not 9? Why not 11, like President Benson, Yvonne, slacking off here at 5. What's going on? Did you feel pressure?
I don't remember feeling pressure. I was really overwhelmed because my mother died when I was in my 30s. We didn't have any. Charlie's parents were always in Florida. They were divorced and they'd return. I didn't have any help. I didn't have any relatives even living close. Charlie, and when we moved, Charlie hired at BYU. When we moved down here, we didn't have a place to stay, but we were renting. I was pregnant with my 4th, and he immediately was called into a bishopric in the MTC. So he wasn't even attending the ward with us. And people, we had Ryan, we got into our home. We actually built our first little home here. Charlie built it. And it was how many square feet? 912. It was really little.
Oh my gosh.
On the bottom floor, and had a little half floor up above it. Anyway, but people in the ward thought that I was divorced or single because he was never with me. And I couldn't see myself going up to the MTC with 4 kids. Some of the older, like the bishop, his wife came up with him and so forth. Anyway, long story short, Charlie's also been a bishop, and he was also in the branch president of the MTC again. And I had the 5, and I had my tubes tied.
Yeah. I did the same.
You don't want to do that because you could die, and then he could have more posterity for the church.
That's funny that all 3 of us had the same thing, because I felt very strongly when I was pregnant with my last one that I couldn't do anymore. My oldest was 9. And we were, renting a home, and I was just overwhelmed. And I said, I can't, we're not going to be able to have any more. I think you should have a vasectomy. That man ran as fast as he could. He was in the bishopric. So we went and got the handbook. I can't, and I said to him, are you planning on having children with somebody else? Well, you never know. I mean, I almost died. He would have been left with 5 children. He could have remarried and had more children. So it was very explicit in the handbook that these men could not have. And I don't believe actually that sterilization was even authorized back then, but I wasn't asking anybody for permission. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I felt
And
guilty. I felt guilty about doing it. I did, for sure. I did have some guilt, but I just knew that, given the mental issues in my family, I don't know if I mentioned some of
yeah,
them. My mother
yeah,
also had a nervous breakdown, and so we had a lot of that mental. I thought, I'm not going to
yeah.
make it if I.
I think the most interesting thing is, and I really feel like this is what I love about all three of you ladies, is there came a time in our lives when we weren't asking for permission. And we just had to do what our gut feeling told us to do. Now, Lila, like you said, with your seventh, did you go to the bishop and say, should I have 9? Should I have 2 more? You tell me what to do. Right?
No, I told my husband, you go get that done right now.
Yeah. 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 So
it's good for you. You will go get that taken care of. Because I felt like I already been through enough physical trauma with all the babies that was the least that he could do was that.
Right.
And he didn't like it, but we had 7. So he was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was told not to have, at the same time as Stuart was told not to have a vasectomy because the brethren weren't sure he could be resurrected with fully functioning. I was told by the same member of the presidency of the 70, and I was 30 at the time, and he said, what if one of you dies and the other one remarries and you want more children? And I have said before, it's finally when it dawned on me that, yeah, but we have an eternal marriage here. Supposedly, we have an eternal marriage that is at risk because of the fear of pregnancy, because I was very fertile. Okay.
Yeah.
So this marriage may not survive if I don't get my tubes tied. And here we are now after 50 years. But if we had thought, if I had gotten pregnant again, I knew it would have killed Stuart also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah. And I love what you said, Yvonne, that
back my
that the entire basis, the foundation of Camille Johnson's talk was that she listens to President Nelson every single morning, that she listens to one of his talks, that he is a spokesperson for God, and that she is following the prophet. And the point is, all of us over the age of 60 said, well, what prophet were you listening to in 1980 and 1990? When did you decide to listen to this prophet? Oh, when you already had your career and your children? Because you weren't listening to the prophets that were the spokesperson for Jesus Christ when we were all the age that you were going through, BYU and law school. And I love Yvonne was smart enough to send over this article that was written in the Exponent. And it was written by Caroline. I love that Caroline just has a first name. Is she like Cher? Does everybody know who Caroline is? She just has a first name. So on her byline, it just says Caroline. And it does talk a little bit about her. She does do a little bio at the end. But let's go through this because I believe that she points out everything that we're talking about. She just, and I would like to talk next month, ladies, I want to talk about this. She says, I remember talking with Margaret Toscano 15 or so years ago about the recently published David Paulson and Martin Polito article, A Mother There, a survey of historical teachings about Mother in Heaven, which had made a big splash in the Mormon studies world. After all, Margaret had, along with her sister Janice Allred, been warned to stop writing about Heavenly Mother. They continued to do so, and both were eventually excommunicated. But there was this new article analyzing hundreds of church leaders' statements about her, published in BYU Studies, of all places. What did Margaret make of this? I wanted to know. I'm sure Margaret had insightful things to say about the article, but the one thing I still remember distinctly is that she said that article hurt a little. It hurt because it seemed to imply there was never any sacred silence being enforced by church authorities about Heavenly Mother discourse and theology. It hurts because it ignored the severe price women like her had paid in the past for thinking, talking, and theologizing about Mormonism's feminine divine. It hurt because it felt like it was erasing her experience. And I love that beginning. I feel like that's exactly what we're talking about, is that our experience as young moms, young women, just starting our families, is completely being erased. And like I had one person say, but aren't you glad? Aren't you glad that they changed the temple ceremony, that you no longer bow your head and say, I promise to obey my husband? Aren't you glad that your granddaughters will not make those covenants in the temple to obey your husband as he obeys God, and that you are not allowed? Aren't you glad? Therefore, erasing our history. And I love the way she put that.
Yeah. I think we would have all felt a little bit, more charitable toward Camille, President Johnson, if she had, even just in passing, like she did with the scriptures. Like, I didn't have time to read the scriptures every day, but it said something like, I had a struggle. At the time, the prophet of the church was, acknowledging that in some small way, we just want to hear a little bit of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
I think we'd be satisfied with a lot, with a little. That's,
There's
because it's just
so
the
much.
total ignoring of past teachings, and yeah, it's hurtful. And that's why that's why she got so many comments on Instagram. That's why
Right.
the sister Annette Denning, that's why she got
Dennis.
so many comments on Instagram, is because it hurts when our lived experience is portrayed as something that it isn't.
Yeah.
It's
Denied.
It's almost portrayed as if we didn't work hard enough, or that we were lazy learners or lax disciples, because look what she managed to pull it off.
Oh yeah,
and you could have.
How silly that we took them at their word.
Yes, how silly. Because that was one of the comments on Instagram, is like, well, President Benson, and you need to play that clip, Renee, when he says it, it's a true prophecy. A true prophet has said that women should stay in the home, 24/7. Can't remember how he puts it, but full time. He says women should stay in the home full time, because there's no ambiguity there. But the people who are commenting now say, well, it was just counsel. It wasn't a command.
It was not a commandment. It was counsel.
It was just counsel. And we're like, no, well, when the prophet speaks,
Yeah,
we're supposed to let God prevail. And
I mean, are we free to say Mormon now without getting approved?
So I have to tell you one quick story about a woman in my ward. She lives 3 houses up the street. I'm not going to use her name, but a very intelligent woman, a very scrupulous woman, smart, and living the gospel just to the max. So President Benson gives his talk. At the time, she is working at it was a computer firm, but I think it was probably a high-level job, because she was older than her husband, and he had a job. I'm not going to go into, because people might know who they are, but his job was kind of like. And he was a really great guy too. They still are, but it didn't bring in income regularly. It wasn't a regular income job. But she took him at his word, and she quit her job and stayed home. And I can't remember if they even had one child at the time. Maybe they had their first little baby, but they ended up having 3. And she literally fed her family from her garden, working in her garden, and on lentils. And I remember this class she gave in Relief Society on extreme couponing, if you remember that. And she had this whole table full of groceries that she'd bought with her coupons that she clipped out and put in the thing. And she had the receipt, because she was so good at everything. She paid 32 cents for that table full of groceries with her extreme couponing. And that's how she followed and it was she was glorified. She was following the prophet. And it was, listening to Camille Johnson, you're thinking, well, that was an unnecessary sacrifice. Why did you do that, you silly woman?
Yeah, I love that you said that, unnecessary sacrifice. I love that. She goes on to say that Margaret's reaction explains her mixed feelings about Camille Johnson's recent talk, at BYU Women's Conference, in which she spoke about pursuing her career and motherhood simultaneously. Tamara Kemsley has a great write-up on it in the Tribune, which particularly focuses on Johnson's encouragement to women to have children, a topic I won't be addressing here. And a quote from the talk has been featured. And that's where I first saw it, was in the Salt Lake Tribune. I pursued an education, both undergraduate and a law degree. I was married midway through my legal education. So she didn't get married after she took a course her freshman year.
No.
I had my first son the year after I passed the bar. I had babies, and my husband and I loved and nurtured them while we were both working. It was busy, sometimes hectic. We were stretched and sometimes tired. I supported him and he supported me. Family was and still is our top priority. My husband and I sought inspiration in these choices and in the timing. It was what we felt impressed to do. Now, both President Kimball and President Benson say there is no timing. Let the children come as they naturally would come. They made that very specific. There was no spacing out of your family. It was you let the children come. What were you going to say, Martine?
She says, yes, they sought inspiration. I said that to you guys earlier. I'm eternally grateful to have received inspiration from the Lord and direction from prophets to help us in the timing in our choice to invite children in our family when we did it. She turns it into a positive. See, we invited children. Like, we didn't go the way of the world. We actually invited children. But
Right.
the timing, like, I'm being picky, but they got married in 87. She was in graduate school. She had completed her first in law school. They didn't have, the earliest they could have had that first child was in 1990. They didn't do what we did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Later, they did. It wasn't right away.
You're saying they postponed the children. Yeah.
Obviously they did.
The worldly gain came in and they thought, we can't have it now. Our careers are at stake, so we're going to postpone it. Yeah.
Exactly. Finances, I guess, 3 times in that talk. She is speaking not just to the women in the Marriott Center. She is speaking to the women of the church.
17, well, half of that. Yeah. 8 million women. Yeah.
Women who will read that talk and will hear Sister Johnson in her fine attire talk about not being as financially secure as she would like to be. Women who were couponing.
Yeah.
That was gross. 3 times she mentions finances. I was so horrified.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of when Bonnie Cordon was like, we aren't rich now. And it's like,
exactly. Same thing.
Yeah, exactly. She said, I juggle pregnancy, having babies, nurturing children, a carpool, little league, church responsibilities, being a supportive spouse, and my professional pursuits. It was a joyful juggle I wouldn't change. We felt confident in our course because we were letting God prevail. And now then Caroline says, I feel maybe not hurt so much, but more a sense of consternation that a significant part of the story has been left out. Don't get me wrong. I think it's fantastic that President Johnson followed her own conscience and figured out a way to participate in her career while having kids. I love that she's laying this path out as a respected possibility for Mormon mothers. And I think she's also setting out a great example of placing primacy on own relationship with deity. All very good things. But a huge part of her story as a working LDS mother in the 1980s and 90s is glaringly missing. Yeah. What about all those authoritative messages that she heard loud and clear in her formative years that emphasize the evils of working motherhood? She would have been in her mid-20s in 1987, pursuing her law education when President Benson quoted extensively from President Kimball's 1977 Mothers Come Home talk. And then she says, this is what President Kimball said. Wives come home from the typewriter, the laundry, the nursing come home from the factory, the cafe. No career approaches in importance that of wife, homemaking, mother, cooking meals, washing dishes, making beds for one's precious husband and children. Come home, wives, to your husbands. Make home a heaven for them. Come home, wives, to your children, born and unborn. And Martine, I like what you said that, up until recently, I would say probably the 90s, male nurses were not prevalent. I mean, the nursing careers were a female based, and I remember being in the hospital and having a male nurse at one point and going, yeah, I want, bring in the ladies. He was very, just kind of on schedule. But there were a couple times where I'm like, can I get some food? There just wasn't that nurturing thing. But you're right. I mean, to even say nursing, come home.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, she says, and a husband is expected to support his family, and only in an emergency, Camille Johnson, should a wife secure outside employment. Her place is in the home, to build the home into a heaven of delight. Numerous divorces can be traced directly to the day when the wife left the home and went out into the world, into employment.
Yeah, I didn't notice this word before, but the evils of working mothers. I mean, really, it wasn't just, this is your noble calling. I mean, because it is wonderful to be a homemaker, at least it is wonderful to be a mother. You're totally right. Camille Johnson, in her idyllic memoir, I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if everyone had a marriage like that, where you could have a husband and wife supporting each other and both having careers, but both having parenthood being, the top priority. And it's beautiful. I would love that for everyone, but it's not what they were saying. They were saying that it was evil to pursue a career. It was selfish.
Yes.
Outside of the home. And I didn't pick up that evil word before, but I remember feeling that's how they framed it.
Well, and I remember when Amy Cohen Barron, is that her name? The
Supreme Court judge.
The support. Yeah.
Catholic,
I remember when she was put in, and I remember that she was saying that she has like 7 children and she was carpooling. And I'm like, here's the deal. I have a daughter that has 4 children. She lives in her car. She is picking up, dropping off for seminary in the morning, going back home, waking up her 14-year-old, getting him to football practice, coming back, picking up her 12-year-old, taking him to his, physical therapy, picking up her 10-year-old, taking her to, a piano lesson. She is living in her car. That is a life devoted to motherhood, as Camille talks. This is a woman with a bachelor's degree in social services. She could very easily be working. No, she couldn't be very easily working. She has 4 children that demand every single minute of her day. So when I hear these women say, I was carpooling, my husband and I, and I'm just like, there are so many hours in the day. You are not being honest here. Like I think it was
nanny, right?
Yes.
That's what Martine,
I remember. Yeah. That's what Martine said. She had to have had a nanny. Amy Poehler was once asked, how do you do it? She has 3 boys, I think. She's divorced and she's an actress, and she's a very busy working Hollywood actress. Someone said to her, how do you do it? She says, I have a wife. Mm-hmm. She was using the term wife as I have a housekeeper, I have a nanny, I have help.
Yeah.
It is physically impossible.
But don't be hypocritical about it.
Exactly. Yeah. I had help. If it wouldn't have been for the help that we were able to get for our severely disabled child, I would have been a mess. I would have been in a hospital myself. I had to have help to take care of him. My husband was working 12, 14 hours a day. And fortunately, our school system in America had allowed disabled children to go to school. So I had between the hours of 7:30 and 3 to go to an aerobics class or go out to lunch with my friends. But inevitably, I would get a phone call saying, come and get your, and I would cancel things because I had to go do that. It is not possible. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, I'm fine. Like, I love that. If it wouldn't have been for the beautiful people that helped me with my son, I could not have done anything, you know. And so give these women acknowledgement. The nanny that helped us, my mother, like you were saying, grandmother that helped us with childcare so that I could get my law degree and litigate a pharmaceutical case,
There you
know.
go. Yeah. Yeah.
Just, you know. And then she says, she would have been raised in the era when church leaders were saying things like earning a few dollars more for luxuries cloaked in the masquerade of necessity, or so-called opportunity for self-development of talents in the business world, a chance to get away from the mundane responsibilities of the home. These are all satanic substitutes for clear thinking. That was a talk that was delivered by H. Burke Peterson in 1974.
Yeah.
I remember I remember reading that in the Ensign. I remember, unfortunately, President Hinckley saying that, you're working for the luxuries. And so many mothers worked for the music lessons.
Yes.
Music lessons that the church is happy the kids took so they can have free musicians performing at church and playing for primary and sacrament meeting and relief society.
Yeah.
And for having like a little decent furniture sometimes and not the broken down stuff we had when we were at BYU.
Right.
Yeah.
Or for having, as Lila said, like I did when my son started second grade, I took a little job in the local department store. It was called mommy hours. You work 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So you could be home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
She goes on to say, she would have been about 20 when Ezra Taft Benson said, it is a misguided idea that a woman should leave the home where there is a husband and children present to prepare educationally and financially for an unforeseen eventuality. He literally came out and said, it is a misguided idea that you should get an education or any kind of training for a unforeseen eventuality. How many of us have unforeseen eventualities happen in our lives?
And by the way, she wasn't 20 when Ezra Benson gave that talk. He gave that talk, I just checked on it, February 22nd, 1987. She was married July 30th or 31st, 1987. That talk was heard around the Mormon world. She couldn't have been married 1 year into law school without knowing about that talk. She was going to law school at the U, and he gave that talk at BYU. It was impossible to miss.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Martine, that little pamphlet
was made into.
They used to give it out on Mother's Day with the little rose on it. Did you ever get one of those? I got one from Lord. I might have been in the organization that actually organized that thing for the.
You're forgiven. I'll do a Chad Daybell. Your sins are forgiven.
There you go.
And she goes on to say, even though I was a teen in the 1990s when working mother rhetoric was softening a bit, I too felt the weight of it. I have no doubt this discourse influenced some of my choices in my 20s and encouraged me to aim lower professionally than I might have otherwise. And as for the women living through that moment in 1987, when President Benson told mothers to come home from the workplace, well, we know the devastation that incurred. Lavina Fielding Anderson, examining the repercussions of Benson's 1987 To the Mothers in Zion talk, wrote in the 1988 dialogue, overwhelmingly, the reaction I have heard from women has been one of pain and of anger, whether they have been employed or not. One woman who has worked all her adult life and has 5 children said that her husband, who was a bishop, had been besieged during the week following the address by women full of hurt and resentment. And that's exactly what is happening with this talk, is the besiege of resentment. How dare you, say that we weren't listening to the prophet, that we weren't reading our scriptures, that we were somehow wrong because we didn't do what she had done. And then she goes on to say, again, I'm glad she talked positively about being a working mother. This is a good rhetoric shift. I celebrate a future in which Mormon mothers are less torn up over work mother issues. when they realize that it's absolutely valid and righteous to pursue both simultaneously. But I don't think we should forget the distance we've traveled to get to this moment. As with many other topics pertaining to the church, it just doesn't help to ignore past reality. And I think that's what we're talking about. It's another layer of ignoring past reality with no acknowledgement of what was said or what was demanded, and acting as it. This is where the term gaslighting is an overused term, but this is a perfect example where you've got someone standing up saying, I listen to the prophet every morning as I'm getting dressed. I follow his guidance. He talks with the Lord. He speaks for Jesus, not just for LDS, but for the world. I listen to the prophet. And we're like, I think I was listening to the prophet. Was I not listening? Am I crazy? Was I told I had the priesthood? Did I miss that somehow? How did I miss all of this new information that's come out? That is where the resentment and the hurt is coming in. So she verbalized everything that I was thinking. And let me just read her last statement. This talk was an important start to President Johnson's working mother story, but LDS women now are craving to hear the rest of her story, including the messy and difficult parts, the parts where she confronted head-on authoritative rhetoric that critiqued and misunderstood her choices, and where she learned to place primacy on her own inspiration. Now, that will be a story I'd be excited to hear.
That's right. We don't need to talk. We don't, from her example, it's the complete opposite of follow the prophet. You know, the example of her life is your own spirituality. Listen to your own inspiration, your own. That's the maddening part of it, is the hypocrisy of that talk, which quotes President Nelson 17 times. But the lesson of her life is the good thing is don't follow the prophet. I'm sorry, but that's the lesson I came for.
Right. If we could, like, if I could rewrite her talk, it would be perfect if she would have just said, you know what? I know President Benson said this. I heard it too. And I chose to follow my own inspiration on that. I didn't follow what the prophet told me. And I'm glad. And this was the outcome. And I see, it was difficult at times. Yes. All the things she said, I hated that she did a joyful juggle. There's going to be t-shirts. I'm doing a joyful
somebody on Etsy's already doing it.
Joyful jiggle. I think that's not going to be a t-shirt.
But
and if her husband started his business, his used car salesperson business, which is an empire now. It's not, it's not a lot on State Street. It's much bigger than that, obviously. Income was probably uneven, it was probably iffy. Anybody who has started a business knows that. Lila's mentioned it with her fabric design business. I never know when I'm going to see a check coming in. So I have to have another source of income. But you're the only one who's doing both, Lila.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of my own choices, right? I didn't follow the prophet and stay married. I got a divorce, and therefore I didn't go to college and get a degree, and I didn't do what she did to have that to fall back on. So now I'm paying the price for that. But I did what President Benson said to do.
Yeah.
One could argue, look what happens when you follow the prophet. I'm the example of what not to do. And she's the example of what to do. But she'll never say that. That will never come out of her mouth. She will never say, I chose not to follow the prophet. Never. So we're going to continue to be gaslit. And we all have to just sort of put it in our compartment and deal with that, knowing that she's not telling us the whole story. And that's the frustration. It's like, just be real. Don't get up there and tell a half of a story and then act like that's normal. And that's what we all can do, because it's not. ignoring.
Don't say I didn't put off my family. I followed the prophet. I didn't put off my family when you actually didn't have your first child until the first 3 years. Some of us wish we had done that.
Yeah.
I remember after our first son passed away, so he was born 9.5 months after we were married. And then he passed away 4 months later.
What were you doing for 2 weeks, Martine? I mean, putting off having your family?
Nothing. Because we were also following, don't use artificial birth control. That's what we were doing. Here, I just added us. So after he passed away, I got pregnant a couple of months later, I think, yes. But we knew what it was like to have a baby. So we really enjoyed those 8 months of not having a baby. We did things together that we hadn't had time to do when we were first married because I was pregnant and sick as a dog. So we really enjoyed that second pregnancy better because we knew we weren't going to have that time after the baby was born. So anyway, it was a hard talk. Like halfway through, I told Stuart, I don't know if I can finish this. This is really tough. And I had a really tough time with the financial issues because here she is, a corporate lawyer saying, because we took these 3 callings, that calling with my husband and then general primary and then general relief society president, I didn't have those extra 10 years to recover from the mission. Every person I've known, every couple I've known who have served as mission presidents have said it was a financial sacrifice.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they're asked to serve at a time in their lives when they're at their peak earning years, generally. Mm-hmm. And they're giving that up. I'm not criticizing that, but saying, oh gosh, we're not as financially secure as we would have been because I took these callings.
How about acknowledging your privilege as a wealthy white woman in the church, living in probably a very nice house on a lovely street, and you're talking to women in Guatemala, you're talking to women in Ghana, you're talking to women who don't have 2 nickels or whatever their coin is to rub together about your sacrifice financially. It's just, that's horrific.
And they're told to pay tithing.
Oh,
yeah. You don't have to.
Even if you can't eat, even if you can't afford to buy food, pay your tithing first.
And the reason I bring that up is because my experience, because I served in the military, I had the GI Bill. So my college was paid for, plus we would get like $300 a month from the GI Bill. So we're struggling. We're just married. I'm like, I could use $300 a month. And so I went back to school when I was pregnant, and then he was born in June. So as soon as the semester ended, then I had him. And then I thought, well, I'll go back to school after he's born. So a few months later, he was born in June. So in the fall, I decided I'd go back to school. So he's like 3 months old. He cried every night from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock. That was just his schedule. And so I would try to take a few classes. My husband called me up and he said, I can't do this. This baby won't stop crying. And I had to go home because I would nurse him for like 3 hours a night. He just had, he just needed that. And so I had to stop what I was doing to take care of my baby. And that's what I'm saying, Yvonne, when I was talking about that, for her to say, I was able to do these things. It's like, did you not nurse your children? Did you not have ill children that, my husband could not nurse, and that was a priority for me to nurse my children. And so like you say, tell us the stories, how you were about ready to go into court and your milk leaked all over your suit. Tell us how you were pumping in the bathroom so that you could nurse your new baby and still be a lawyer. That's what we want to hear.
That's true.
Because that's where that's the reality of, I put my children first, which is what she said, being a motherhood, put that first.
And please don't quote President Nelson over and over and over. Somebody else. Get somebody else.
I followed the current prophet, but I didn't follow the one from 30 years ago. 40 years ago.
Maybe she's making up for that. I guess we shouldn't judge her. I'm going to be extra faithful to this one because
secrets is what it sounded like.
I have to say, and I'm just going to say this. For her to make such a fuss over President Nelson, who literally has done nothing but, in my opinion, build temples because they have billions of dollars to blow, and they're trying to create an illusion of growth. And he did the family proclamation. He did the new logo and changed from Mormon, took out Mormon as a word. What else has he done?
Yeah.
And there's world starvation. There was the coronavirus. They didn't do anything. Nothing. There was like, there's no prophecy. There's no revelation. There's nothing to speak to this world. Oh, he's the prophet of the whole world. What's he doing for them? I don't see it. I don't see it. So I'm like, he's not the guy to put on a pedestal. I'm sorry. I just don't.
Well, and in that same light, I want to know about Danzel. Give me a talk over the pulpit about your 9 children and what this woman did, because you were busy becoming a cardiac surgeon. 10?
9.
Yeah, the one boy.
They had
9,
a son at the end. Yeah.
That's right. 9 girls and a boy. Tell me that she also was a practicing attorney.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
She gave up her singing career. She gave up a scholarship at Juilliard to marry him. And Stuart would tell you, every time they attended our ward or our joint wards after we moved here, Stuart always found her looking very, very tired and worn.
Yeah.
Even though she didn't have kids at home by then. They were long gone.
I mean, this is awful to say, but I always felt like, when she passed, he's a heart surgeon. And she was sitting right next to him. And she slumped over and died. And he talked. He's the one that talks about it and described it that way and said, and I couldn't do anything for him. Like, how about you have CPR with the doctor and have her checked regularly? She was probably one of those Mormon women that, she came last. Everybody else came first. All those 10 kids, and of course him. She always, it was him, always him. And
exactly.
I just felt like, wow, that was
10 kids will ruin your heart.
Yeah.
It will.
Yeah. But he could have, it seems like he could have
helped out with that. Like, got her a regular checkup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She just went, probably just worn out, just sort of.
Yeah. He said he knew her health issues.
Yeah. And he kind of let it go. I remember that. That was interesting.
Did he say that? Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. Well, ladies, I love this. I love this conversation. And I really, like I said, I would love for next month to get together and talk about the beginning of this message where she talked about Margaret Toscano and Janice Allred and going back to, I interviewed MacArthur. Can't remember her last name now. But when we went to the faith conference and she spoke on a Heavenly Mother, standing next to her is Fiona Givens, who was asked nicely to step down from the Maxwell Institute because of the firesides that she was giving on Mother in Heaven. And now MacArthur is having all of these art galleries and putting out this book, and she's publishing it, and nothing is being said.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, again, this is a perfect example of erasing what these women, Janice Allred with 10 children, wasn't it? At least 10 children, sacrifice, serving a mission. Go ahead, Lila.
No, I'm just really appalled.
Yeah. And again, you're just washing it out and going, well, aren't you glad we're talking about it now? That's what she said to me. Aren't you glad we're talking about it now?
It's not enough. Like, it's not enough. You need to apologize for the past. You need to correct your mistakes and state them so that we don't feel like we're just losing our minds.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, this should probably be for another episode, but yesterday on Mormonism Live last night, RFM showed a part of a training, General Authority training from this conference, its April conference. That's from Dallin Oaks about what constitutes apostasy. And one of those bullet points is teaching on topics that the Lord has chosen not to reveal not to give them further light and knowledge. I would think that Mother in Heaven would be one of those, and that should constitute apostasy. It did
Right.
for some women who were
Right.
excommunicated. So
Yeah. I don't know if you, when I interviewed her and I said, how do you give this talk after Dale Renlund just told us to stop talking about Mother in Heaven? And she said, hey, she was living in India at the time. She said, do you know what Brother Renlund's talk did? Women in India had never heard of the idea that there was a Mother in Heaven. And by him mentioning it in conference, they are now enlightened. And I was like, okay, that's a huge stretch.
Yeah.
You know, but that was her response. So maybe that'll be next month. All right, ladies, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences and your feelings about this talk. And I don't think ours is going to be the last for sure.
no.
And let's do this again. What did we call ourselves? Yvonne, I can't even remember. What did we call ourselves? The Ellis
learners or something, wasn't it? The
Lax disciples, something lax silver disciples.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, the acronym is LDS anyway. Lax disciples silver.
silver hairs, lax disciples, silver hairs, I guess.
Yeah, something like that. So maybe that'll be the next title for our podcast. So thank you so much. I appreciate all your wisdom and your input. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thanks, Renee.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Okay. I just cannot thank all of you enough. It's been amazing. It was amazing. And I really encourage you. YouTube is a beautiful gift. Just type in Camille Johnson, BYU Talk. You can find it. You can listen to it if you can get through it. As Martine mentioned, I really suggest you speed it up twice at least, because it's her voice is really hard to listen to. She's got that, what they're calling now, the trad wife voice, the baby voice. The woman is an attorney. I don't get it. But anyway, so thanks for joining us today. Tune in next week on She Became Visible. We will be highlighting another topic for women to stand up, speak for themselves, become visible, find out who they are, and share it with everyone. So good night, everybody.